Hello, everyone. It's a brand new week here on the Betting Weekly Studios, and we start our new week every Monday with a trip down the betting dojo. Did I say I'm joined by Neil Channing, professional gambler, my co-host here on the dojo. Before I introduce you, Neil, please hit the subscribe button. I ask you every week to do this. Still a large proportion of you do not follow our shows, do not follow our channel here. Ring the bell as well. Be notified of every time any bit of content drops. And this week we've got a huge amount of content. We've got the Premier League, we've got the Champions League, and we've got the final major of 2025, the US Open over in Flushing Meadow. And I'll be over there alongside Sean Calvert. You can follow our adventures on our socials at Because We Win. That's the housekeeping done and dusted. Now let's get down to the nitty gritty of the world of sports betting. Joining me we've got a better internet connection. I usually turn around and say, we need to be worried about the buffering because Neil's in a bad place. But it seems that he's back in the land of living. He's back in the year 2025. Good morning, Neil. How are you?
Yeah, I'm back in the capital for a while. I'll be in London for a couple of weeks. So I'm actually going racing to York this week as well. But when you see me next week, I'll be back in London. So I've been good. Been doing a bit of traveling around, and it's been a week of. I'm sure you were very excited by the Premier League starting again. I actually didn't really get too involved. I know you always say, you shouldn't bet on the first few weeks of the season. It wasn't really that. I just quite busy with horse racing this week, and I had this TV thing that I think we're going to talk about later, and I just didn't really get round to it. The football. Was it a good first week of the season? Were you excited for it?
I was excited. I went to a match yesterday. I went to Chelsea v Crystal Palace.
And
I went
did
with
Palace
my friends
win that?
and 0-0. That was the most
0-0.
debate. It was a free kick that Eze took the free kick, and there's this new rule that came in that was caused uproar. The Chelsea players didn't even know anything about it. The crowd didn't know anything about it. It was a thunderbolt from Eze, and then it got ruled out. That was the big talking point of the match.
A couple of new rules, aren't there? There's something to do with the keepers holding onto the ball less, and something to do with the free kicks, isn't it?
I don't think the players. What chance have I got to knowing the rules and the managers and the
I
players?
just wondered if
the
you
referees
thought
know the rules.
they would add goals or take away goals. Generally, the rules, but
well, I'm judging by yesterday's taking away goals. But I mean, even the referee didn't know about it. He went to see VAR. The VAR he got called to look at the monitor, and then I think some of the VAR told him what the rule was. I mean, there is a rule for it, but it's absolutely crazy. There's no infringement on the goal. The guy's put a hard driver in, and I'm not talking to someone who bet Crystal Palace. I didn't have a bet on the game, but
yeah.
The one thing is, if you're betting Chelsea at single figure prices to drop points at home, I went back through the season. I know it's only first day of the season, but most of the teams that win the championship win the title, win on the first game of the season. It's very rare that they drop points, especially at home. So that's a bit of a problem if you're a Chelsea better. But obviously, it's early stages. Only one underdog won the weekend in the opening day of the Premier League. That's a trait that's gone on throughout the season. Betting favourites. I think if you bet the favourites, you would have lost as well, because there was 3 draws, very rarely draws. So betting underdogs isn't a profitable thing in the start of the Premier League season. But it was a weekend deal. I mean, we've spoken about this. As the outsider, as the favourites now become dominant in sports. And the thing that caught my attention this week was how many tournament favourites won again the bigger events. And these players are exceptional in their sport at the moment. I think we're going through a generational phase here where the best players in the world, I've said it so many times, are the bets, however low you get them. Scotty Scheffler wins the golf, wins by 2 shots. He turned over a 4-shot. It was 4 behind McIntyre going in the final round, turned that over, 1 by 2. An incredible performance from Scotty Scheffler. Yannick Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz, the dominant forces in men's tennis, both through to the final in Cincinnati the week before the US Open, where traditionally, when you look at the greats, Federer, Djokovic, Nadal, big Sampras, all the big players of the generations, none of them have ever done well in the week before the US Open. Those 2 are in the final. Unheard of. You don't know players want to peak. Iga Swiatek on the recurrence Wimbledon champion into the final. Ronnie O'Sullivan, the greatest snooker player of all time, getting 2 147s. I know he lost in the final against Neil Robertson, but
just
incredible
amazing
performance there. And Luke Littler, the darts player, obviously the American audience are getting to know about this kid. He's won again. He won the tournament in New Zealand, beat Luke Humphries, his main rival, averaged 115, and on the back-to-back of winning in Australia. These favourites are winning everything. And I looked again this morning, Neil. Scheffler's still 5 to 1.
That was exactly what I was going to say. I just looked, literally while you were speaking, I quickly looked. USPGA next year, plus 400. I think I've got that the right. No, plus 350. I think USPGA plus 400 for the US Open, plus 400 for the Masters. I mean, if he carries on and arrives at the Masters fit and healthy, there's no way he's going to be bigger than plus 250. There's just no way. Like, he is totally dominant in the sport, and the Masters is set up for him. I mean, it's the perfect course for him. And I backed him at plus 275 for one tournament, one of the two majors that I backed him for this year. And I think the Masters, I backed him at plus 350. But going into the Masters this year, he was nowhere near as dominant as he is now. And he's plus 400. I know it's tying up money and people don't like to do that, but there's just no way that he's going to go into the Masters bigger than that price. And, he could easily be plus 225. Tiger Woods was sub 2-1 for the Masters at different times. You can say, well, he's not as dominant. He hasn't won as many tournaments over a period of time. Tiger literally was winning like 8 tournaments a year. But it's getting to that stage. And with, I think you said before about the places as well. Like, if he doesn't win, he just frames. Okay, yeah, if you bet him, if he is plus 350 and you get, if you have to wait to get the places and you bet nearer the time, maybe he is plus 300 or something. And you're getting a fifth odds, so you're betting minus 160 that he makes a place. He must be like minus 300 to be in the top 8 in the Masters. Surely. It just seems crazy.
I'm looking at his stats here in the last 2 years, right? This year, 18 events played, 5 wins, top 10, 15 times. If you go back through the last 2 seasons, so 24-25, 37 tournaments played, 12 wins. And how many times out of those 37 did he finish in the top 10?
I mean, more than 30.
31.
Yeah. It's incredible. The other thing is just because, like, obviously on the Dojo, we like to talk more in terms of principles of betting rather than specific tips. And a lot of people watching this will be thinking, oh, great, why don't you just give me a tip on something that's happening today that I can bet on now and win some money for the weekend or something. These two idiots are telling me to have a bet on something that's next April. I understand that, but what I'm saying is normally in betting, we talk a lot about recency bias and people getting carried away in the market overreacting to stuff. Scotty Scheffler wins a tournament comfortably yesterday, a good tournament as well. It wasn't like a really weak field. He's reiterated his dominance in the sport, and none of the people working for any of the big companies see the need to cut him for any of the majors next year. Usually, you would expect them to overreact, wouldn't you? And us to be having this conversation and saying, "Oh, it's ridiculous," total recency bias. He's just won one tournament. What did we learn this week that we didn't already know about how great Scotty Scheffler is? And they've slashed him into, plus 250 for the Masters. But no, he's plus 400. He's still the same as he was before he won the Open. It just seems like they must just be asleep on the job, really.
No, we've seen darts players get 2-1-9 darters and 2-1-4-7s. I mean, what's the greatest achievement?
Well, actually, I think that's incredible. It's obviously much harder to do 2-1-4-7s in a match than 2-9 darters. But I think, going into the World Snooker Championships last year, obviously Ronnie hadn't been seen in the country for months and people were wondering if he was going to turn up. He was quite a big, I can't remember what price he was now. I think it was about plus 700 or something going into the tournament to win, which was kind of incredible price, really. But obviously there was a chance that he just didn't turn up. I wonder whether I haven't, obviously it'll be a pretty illiquid market on the futures for next year's World Snooker Championship. But I guess if he's playing anything like this, he often sort of talks about not bothering or couldn't care less or I've got other things to do other than play snooker, mental health problems, whatever. But you got to feel like Ronnie's going to really have another great year in front of him on the table, given the way he's playing at the moment. The other things we talked about last week, a couple of things. I don't want to skip over it because I don't think it really worked out too well. I think I said to you that we should definitely go unders in all the preseason NFL games on the basis that, clearly there's been a sea change, and the way that teams are approaching the preseason meant that there was quite high scoring on the first 2 weeks. And I felt like recency bias was bound to make the market overreact on week 3. Well, it definitely did overreact, and relative to where you might have expected it to be if you'd have looked 4 weeks ago. But actually, most of these games still went over again. I mean, it wasn't quite so noticeable as the previous weeks. There was a 23, a 31, which would have been close to the line, a 32. But yeah, there was plenty of, there was 43, 49. There was a 41. A lot of them were kind of near the money, really. So maybe the market did overreact a bit, but actually, if you'd have just bet under every game, there wouldn't have been much in it, but you'd have been a small loser. So it probably did revert a little bit towards the mean, but I didn't. To be honest with you, I got so busy with other stuff at the weekend, I didn't even get round to it. But I think it'd be interesting to see what happens this week. I'm sure that the punters will still pummel all the overs again this week.
Now, next week is a busy week of horse racing over in the UK. Obviously, a lot of you Americans followers and subscribers here not really into the the European horse racing or the English horse racing. But it's York, and as Neil said, he's going racing for, is it a 4-day festival? And you going
4 days? Yeah, I'll be at the track all 4 days, and I'll do a lot of writing about it for my tipping site, Betting Emporium. So, it's a busy week for me. I'll be getting up like 3 a.m. each day, doing all the work. Writing all the essays about the races, and then heading off to the track. And then, sadly, some socialising, a bit of drinking and stuff, and then try and wake up again at 3 o'clock the next morning. It's going to be pretty hard on this old body.
Hopefully, lots of winners if you are following Neil on the Betting Emporium. But obviously, British horse racing is facing another struggle. We've spoken about the problems for bettors over here with their checks of how much their wealth is, their affordability checks, various different things, intrusions into stuff that people want. You open an account here, you have emails asking questions, and then you have to do this. And this is going to be probably coming to the stateside shortly as well in terms of protecting problem gambling. Now, Neil was involved in a high-profile show at the weekend. He's a guest appearance on a show in the UK called Luck on Sunday, which is on one of our racing channels over here. And he was, we've got to talk about it because it sparked a lot of attention on social media yesterday with what the government is proposing for racing here, the ramifications for horse racing in this country. And you were involved in a bit of a debate on the channel, and it was obviously that they were cut for time and the debate got cut off a little bit early. I think if you could sort of explain to anyone listening to this what is potentially going to happen over to racing as a sport, and the reasons why you feel so passionately about what is happening. And I thought yesterday you come across exceptionally well on the argument. You made your point very. I think you made your point very, very clear. And unfortunately, for anybody who watched it, we didn't have long enough of the debate because it warranted a lot more time to actually talk about a very serious subject.
Yeah, so I mean, just to take it back a little bit, a long way actually. We didn't really have a separation between. We had a separation, between gaming, betting on casino games and that kind of thing, and betting, sports betting, horse betting, and sports betting. They were separated and run by different kind of jurisdiction. So that changed slightly because of the internet and just the world becoming more modern. So 2005, Parliament got together and said we need to have a new gambling act to reflect these changes, and that came in 2007. And one of the effects of the act was that so we have bookie shops in the UK, betting shops on a street corner, perfectly legal and licensed. You can walk in, big high street names, multinational companies represented on the high street. You can walk in, write out a bet, go up to the counter. You have to be over 18 to do that. And it suddenly became a thing that these shops First of all, they had slots in them, and that was quite a normal thing that there would be a slot machine in there. But then the bookies decided that they could sort of find a grey area in the law where a random number generator would decide basically on a roulette game which number would come down, and they argued in court that that was betting on an event that was happening rather than just playing a table game, because the draw was a sporting event. And therefore, they invented these things, the fixed odds betting terminal. I think I've kind of roughly explained that right. And that meant that people could play roulette effectively. It was mostly roulette. There was blackjack as well, but almost all of the problems came from people playing roulette in the high street, just wandering in and playing a slot machine that was effectively a roulette machine. Now, we'd never had that before in the UK. You to play roulette or blackjack, or dice, other casino games, you had to go to a casino. And back in the day, to join a casino in the UK was quite hard. You had to, some places you had to know somebody who would recommend you, and you had to join. You had to hand over your passport. And actually, for a long time, we had a rule that you weren't allowed to gamble until 48 hours after you joined the casino. So all this changed in the 2007 Act, 2005 Act that came in 2007. And certainly betting shops went from being a kind of a pleasant place where people sat around and talked about football and horse racing and stuff. It became quite a nasty atmosphere in a lot of them. People were definitely pouring too much money into these machines, sort of shouting and swearing. It was really common to go into a shop in the sort of 2010s and see somebody smashing the machine up. That was police being called out, people getting very upset with the people behind the counter. And of course, nobody, everybody on Because We Win doesn't want to see people in problem gambling. We think that people should gamble responsibly with money they can afford to lose. Of course, everybody thinks that. And I definitely think that bookmakers in the UK abused the system a little bit and took advantage. And of course, the other thing that was happening was online betting. People got mobile phones after the Act came in. And now suddenly, this expression sprung up. You've got a casino in your pocket at all times. Now, I'm not totally in love with that as a kind of line, because if we look at gambling in the UK, it hasn't actually really grown that much as a percentage of the economy in that time, from that time until now. But clearly more people are doing gambling than were doing it before. 21 million people gambled in the UK last year, but a large proportion, and there are 58 million people live in the UK, but a large proportion of those just bet on the national lottery. And lots of people that had a bet that wasn't the national lottery just had one or two bets in a year. So, it's a lot smaller cohort that are sort of regular gamblers. Anyway, one thing that's happened recently, and I'll bring it up to date now and talk about the debate yesterday. Actually, I will just speak about one other thing. So there's been talk for the last 3 or 4 years that we need to, or 4 years, I think it is, that we need to have a new gambling act to bring us into the modern age. Mobile telephones, cell phones, whatever you want to call them, and the fact that people much more used to using the internet means that the act is a little bit outdated now, and there are things that need to change. So we had what we call a white paper in the UK, which is a kind of a recommendation to government of what they should do, what they should pass as legislation. So it's a kind of draft of new legislation. And that white paper came out over 2 years ago, and it made a whole load of recommendations of how gambling should change in the UK. And one of the things that was suggested in the white paper that we should have affordability checks. So people, gambling companies should be obliged to check with customers whether they can afford to lose the amounts that they're losing. Now, of course, there was big arguments, first of all, about whether that was an intrusion on people's civil liberties. Libertarians would say, well, it's your money, you earned it, you can do whatever the hell you want with it. And other people would say, well, no, it's up to the state to make sure that people aren't leaving themselves destitute by gambling in a way that's problematic to their family. Most people are somewhere in between. They feel like, yes, the very small percentage of people, tiny percentage of people that have a real problem with gambling where they're potentially losing their business, losing their house, breaking up of their family, they should be protected. But for most people who are just enjoying gambling recreationally and it enhances their life and they have fun with it, should be allowed to just get on with what they're doing. That's what most people think. Now, people are on a spectrum there. Some people feel that the people that are under threat of becoming problem gamblers that aren't necessarily problem gamblers, we need to protect them to make sure they don't become problem gamblers. And some people feel that, we should be much closer to just having a free-for-all and letting people do whatever they want. There's a range and a spectrum of where you stand on it. And there was a big debate in this country about how that should come about. But the sort of general opinion that affordability checks should just happen seemed to just creep up on us. And without really a proper debate, the Gambling Commission seemed to just accept the ideas of the gambling. They would call themselves gambling reformers. Some people would call them prohibitionists. But their ideas seem to be accepted generally, and they crept into the white paper as a suggestion that this should be legislated on. And the only debate seemed to be at what level the affordability checks would come in. Should it be if you're losing $100 a week, or should it be if you're losing $1,000 a week? Well, of course, we all know that one man's small bet is another man's giant bet. Some people have $100 as a fun bet because their normal bet is 5,000, and other people, pizza money is really pizza money. It's a couple of dollars. Some people $10 is the biggest bet they've ever had, and other people $10 is the smallest bet they've ever had. So it's very hard to sort of put absolute numbers on this kind of thing. I stood in a bookie shop in West London a few years ago, using the betting terminal to bet 4-figure amounts on tennis matches, and they asked me if I would like to fill in some paperwork and send them my bank statements and give them a copy of my passport, which they would take away. They could give me no idea on what kind of protection any of this data would have, how long they'd be hanging on to it, what they'd be doing with it, who within the company would get to see it. I asked them multiple times about those things, and I ended up getting banned out of the shop. The same day that I was doing those bets, there was a guy visiting the cash point machine 7 times to feed money into the slots, hitting the machine, shouting and swearing at the top of his voice. This was 9 a.m. on a Monday morning. This guy was missing work to go and do this. He was clearly in pain and suffering, and there was no check on whether he could afford what he was doing.
A similar thing happened to me, Neil. I mean, I used to go into the betting shop pretty regularly. I haven't really bothered anymore because it's just not worth my time. But I used to visit the local shop to here. I went in, the last time I went in, I was trying to bet, I think it was like 4 football teams or a tennis match. I mean, it was the dog, but I mean, it was a couple of £100, like £200 bets. And I had like, I think only 4 or 5. So I went £5,000 bet on 5 things, all around about even money. And I got asked, they said that in the shop, I'd staked a certain amount of money that they needed to get my passport, a copy of my mortgage to see where my home, and this is a kid who's behind the jump who follows me on social media, who's 21 years of age, who, I've got to give him all the information. He's probably 23, 24-year-old kid, actually, to be fair. I've got to give him all his social media. He follows me on social media, knows exactly when my house is empty. I'm not saying he's got any criminal activity, but I've got to give him how much I earn. I've got to tell him where I live. And I refused. But at the same time in the shop, there was people that I know who were playing the roulette machines and people betting tenors on every single horse race, cheering and really get them depressed if they didn't lose. And that they live with their mum and they're unemployed. They haven't got no money, but they could quite easily lose 200, 300 pounds under that radar. And they were the ones that needed protection much more than me. And I would have. The chance of me losing £1,000 was very slim because they're all odds minus 110, even money shots. If we went 2 and 3, we lost £200. But I would have bet that those lot paying a 10, a 10, a 10, a 10, a 10, or lost more over a period of a week than I do.
Well, the other thing is the types of bets you're doing. If you play the NFL and you bet 2 teams every week, one in the early games, one in the late games, and you bet, I don't know, say you want to bet 110 on each, minus $1.10, you bet 110 to win 100 on the 2 games. You're not very likely to be a big winner or a big loser at the end of the season. You're going to win 1, lose 1, win 2, lose none, win 2. It's going to even out that you're kind of roughly even at the end of the season. If you have a great season and you're a good picker, you might be able to pick 55% winners, and you're going to you will have a good season, but you're not going to win, tens of thousands like that. But you are going to turn over a lot of money. You're 200 every week, 18-week season. You're going to be betting in thousands. A guy that bets a tenner parlay of 6 teams every week, he's not going to be betting in thousands, but he's, very, very likely to lose. If he does several parlays every week, he's going to lose a lot more than you, but he's not really going to stake anything like you're staking. And, I just think that there's no understanding of how the betting works. It just makes it, if they're going to keep asking you for all this information, it makes it much harder to be a person that bets just single matches. It makes it much easier for you to get through the checks and stuff if you're going to bet on higher margin products like parlays or same game stuff. So that was a factor. But, the debate kind of raged on. The white paper has been out for 2 years. Most of this stuff has never really been properly implemented. Certainly no votes have taken place in Parliament to say whether this stuff is legal or anything. But the Gambling Commission, who are unelected body, have decided that, they say they haven't mandated affordability checks. They haven't told bookmakers that they have to do affordability checks, but they have the right to fine bookmakers, and they can fine them millions and millions of pounds, and say that, well, we don't think that you've allowed, this street cleaner to lose £50,000. Why have you done that? We can threaten to take away your license, or much more likely, we can fine you for doing that. Now, obviously, if it's a street cleaner and he's gambled 50,000, most people would say, well, that probably shouldn't really have been allowed to happen. And of course, if you bet with a legal bookmaker, you're going to find that stuff comes up. You might get an email to say, we've seen that you've upped your stakes recently. We want to check that you're comfortable with that. They might send you an email suggesting that you put a deposit limit on your account, that you limit yourself to £100 a week or £1,000 a month or whatever. They might send you a questionnaire asking you, if you're okay. Have you been gambling because you're depressed, or have you been pressing your bets because you've been losing, and have you chased your losses, and are you happy with the amount that you're betting? And if you don't answer those questions in a way that they like, they might decide to put some kind of block on your account. They might ask you if you want to have a cooling off period and not be able to log on to your account for a while. So they do all those kind of things. And I don't think many people really have a problem with that. I think people think that that's okay. But it's what people have a problem with is exactly what you've said, the sending in of paperwork, that kind of thing. Anyway, bringing it up to speed with the TV debate yesterday, this is a much more specific thing to the UK. So we have the budget coming up in the autumn, where the Chancellor makes all the kind of taxation policy outlines for the year. And she'll be talking about this kind of black hole that we're supposed to have in terms of the amount that the government can afford to spend relative to what they're getting in taxes. And they'll say that they need to make cuts and all this kind of stuff, and they need to try and get more in taxation. That's generally how it works, and there's trade-offs all the way. Now, one of the things they want to do is simplify areas of taxation. Now, in gambling, back in the 90s and prior to that, we used to have gambling tax in the UK, whereby if you had a £100 bet, £100 bet in the UK, you could choose to pay tax in advance of 10%. So you'd have £100 on a horse at 3-1, or whatever it was, a golfer at 3-1. You'd get, obviously, if he wins or the horse wins, you get back 400. You get your 300 profit plus the stake of 100. But the tax, you'd have to pay either in advance, a tenner, and that would go straight to the government. So you'd stake 110 instead of 100 to get your 400 back on a 3-1 chance, or you could leave it and say, I'll have the tax taken off if I win. So now, if your golfer won at 3-1 and you're expecting 400 back, they would take £40 off you, and that would go off to the government. So that's how the tax used to work, which obviously made it very difficult for punters to win, because it means that you're effectively taking kind of shorter odds than the advertised odds. And if you were a successful gambler, what probably happened was that you won a small amount, but the tax man, because you'd have to turn over so much money to win, the tax man would get a fortune out of you. And the bookmakers would probably say, well, we're losing to this guy, but he's not actually taking any money home because it's all going to the tax man. So you became not a great customer for them. We don't do that anymore. The tax now works that the bookmakers pay the tax themselves, and it's paid on the turnover. So if I have a horse bet, the bookmakers have to pay 15% tax and that goes off to the government on the turnover. But if I play on a slot machine, or I play bingo or roulette, or even just have a sports bet, well, that's taxed at 21%. So the bookmakers, you would think, would be more interested in taking horse bets from people than they are from taking sports bets. But actually, no, because horse racing has this levy in order to fund the sport, pay the prize money, pay the purses and the races, and to keep the courses running and whatever, of 10%. So if I bet a horse bet, the bookmaker has to pay 15% to the government on my turnover and 10% to the people that run horse racing for the levy. So effectively, my horse race bet costs them 25%, whereas if I bet on a snooker match, it only costs them 21%, or a football match or whatever. Now they think that this is all too complicated, the government, and they want to equalise it and to make it the same. So there has been talk of making it the same at 21%. There's also been talk of, that not being a very round number. Why don't we just make it 25%? And obviously, if horse racing keeps the levy at 10%, if they were to equalise it at 21%, well, now horse racing bets would have a deduction going away from the bookmaker of 31%, which would make them. It would mean that the bookmaker would almost prefer to never take a bet on horse racing. If you were a loser, but you just don't lose quickly enough for them, maybe you're betting singles on favourites, where you're losing all the time but just steadily. They won't be interested in you. They'll discourage you from betting. They might close your account. And there's been a huge debate about this stuff. And some people on the other side of the debate, on the maybe the prohibitionist side, have come out and said, well, look at America, look at Delaware, where taxes on gambling are as high as 50%. They still seem to make a profit. Well, actually, Delaware haven't issued licenses to multiple companies. One company in Delaware has a monopoly. So it's
New York is 50% as well, isn't it?
And New York is 50%, and some companies have decided, they've tried New York and decided they can't win in New York because it's quite competitive. There's quite a lot of companies operating in New York, and they're paying this huge tax. So I don't know what's going to happen with it. But we had a good debate on the TV yesterday, and the bloke I was debating, basically, he's a big lobbyist. He's donated money to various think tanks and charities who want to ban gambling advertising or feel that affordability checks were. One of the think tanks that he has helped to fund came up with the idea of affordability checks. They've now realised that affordability checks don't really work, and they're actually a bit of a stupid idea. Unfortunately, they've kind of lumbered us with that. And slightly, turnover on horse racing in the UK has dropped by between 25 and 28% over the last 2 years. You can argue where that money's gone. We don't know. I mean, it's possible that people have decided to stop betting on horse racing and started betting more on other things. For me, it seems more likely that money has gone to the black market. I think the black market is thriving in the UK. But of course, because it is the black market, we don't have official statistics on how the black market are doing. They don't fill out a monthly report. And the people who are prohibitionists say that we're exaggerating. When I say we, I'm saying me as punters, exaggerating over the extent of the black market. And of course, it's hard to argue against that because sadly, the people running the black market don't tend to report to the stock exchange or whatever. Sorry, go on.
But the one thing we do know between us, we know an awful lot of gamblers in this country.
Yeah.
And how, all the guys that we know who have made money or are potentially decent bettors who sort of lose a little bit or win a little bit or slight margin. What percentage of the people that you know, who I'm aware of, are betting on the black market? And now you would say that you and I have got a very, very broad knowledge of people. We've been around the industry a lot. I would say that out of the people that I know on a daily basis, if I took 200 pro bet people I know from betting, I would say between 75 and 80% of them are betting on the black market.
I would 100% agree with you. It might be even higher than that. But I would also say that when you're arguing on television with somebody who has a contrary view, they really don't like it when you use anecdotal evidence. When you can't produce figures from an official body and you just say, well, I know this because I speak to a lot of people and I heard these people say this and I heard these people say that. It's really easy for people to dismiss your argument if that is the extent of your evidence. I'm not saying
we know that
to
be fact. No, but I know. And also what I know to be fact, Neil, is out of those people, I'd say 75% to 80% of them have had trouble getting paid, which is another issue that nobody's saying about.
Yeah, absolutely.
With the sport,
if you bet with legal bookmakers in the legal market, you have protections. You can they have a rule book. You can complain if they don't seem to play by their rules. Payments are swift. We have a great market in the UK. We have lots of bookmakers. They all compete. I mean, there's less than there used to be, and mergers and acquisitions have meant that we have these huge multinational corporations now that own several brands. But we do have good competition. I think in 20 years' time, we'll look back and say this was a golden age of gambling in the UK, but it may be coming to an end. And America is really the new frontier. It is the West, how the West was won. And they are going through a lot of the stuff that we went through 20 years ago in the UK. But I think what they'll find is it'll all happen quicker over there. They're already, I think, American people, to an extent within the industry, complain a little bit about the Europeanization of American gambling. We've talked about that before, how the movement towards same game parlays, the movement towards trying to get people to be lower staking, more bets, more in running, higher margin products, and to be less keen on people, spending hours talking about their bets on season-long wins for teams in NFL, which are just have a small margin and tie up money for 6 months of the year. That's not the business that they're after over there anymore. And pro punters in America seem quite upset about that, but I'm afraid that's just the way things are going to change for you guys. And you might find that in 2 years' time, you're having this huge debate about problem gambling. I think there is a bit of a debate in America already because of the two predominant market leaders taking out so much advertising. You know, people kind of say, geez, I can't watch any TV program without being bombarded by these two companies just constantly ramming it down my throat. In the UK, there's talk about banning TV advertising on gambling altogether, which for horse racing would be a disaster.
That wouldn't be a problem for football, obviously, for football sport. I mean, so many sports sponsoring football, but all the shirt numbers on football teams now are bookmakers I've never heard of.
Well, this is it, because obviously what's happening there is, a lot of these companies that are that you see on the shirts of football teams are actually just looking for Asian customers, predominantly Chinese customers. You know, it's illegal to gamble in China, and people are risking prison time in China if they just log on to an overseas gambling company. But there are companies in other parts of Asia who are looking to attract Chinese clients, and obviously it's difficult for them to advertise. They can't take out a big banner advert on the Chinese tube system. So they know that Asian people are really big fans of the Premier League and other European football, so they sponsor the shirts. You could argue that the Gambling Commission could stamp down on that, and there's no real reason that they should allow overseas unlicensed companies to be advertising in a UK sport. But I guess that will cause some lawyers a lot of time and effort and big legal battles over that kind of thing. But the debate I had with this guy yesterday, essentially, we were talking, he doesn't believe that gambling has any kind of utility, social utility. He won't. He did actually accept. I made him say that for most people, having a bet is a fun activity that enhances your life. I totally accept that for a small percentage of people, it can destroy their family, can destroy their business, can destroy their life. And obviously, nobody wants to see that. Problem gambling is a problem, but it's a very small percentage of gamblers. And I actually made him say that, for most people, it's an enhancement to your life. And I took that as a win. I was pretty happy with that, because I think for a lot of these people, they just want to stop everyone having their fun. And, I think I've said it enough times now. We understand it's not for everyone gambling. I think it's good that, there are age limits on who gambles. I think it's good that the companies send you an email to say, are you happy with your staking going up? I think it's fine for them to say, would you like to have deposit limits on your account? But I think it should be your choice. And if you say, no, I don't want that, I'm happy with what I gamble. Because, a young guy who doesn't have a family, who likes to bet bigger on one particular sporting event, might want to splurge a load of money on that. Maybe you really like the Masters, it's your favorite thing, and you want to bet 10 times bigger on that than you bet on other golf tournaments. That should be your choice, in my opinion.
It was our growing up. We used to meet up 4 or 5 lads, go down the betting shop, all do our football bet, go down to pub, have a couple of beers, and then go around one of the guys' houses, sit and watch teletext, watch the scores coming in, and cheering on. That was our enjoyment. The thing is, Neil, you said on this channel there is a lot of problem, and to be fair, I think a lot of it was the greed of the bookies, like back in those early days of the 2000s. I mean, when financial checks come about, I was offered by a sports book, fill in this form, get it across to us, and if you do it, we'll credit your account with $2,000. That's what they said to me.
Really?
Which is we wouldn't nowadays. You think
I don't
about
think they'd be allowed to do that.
No, it wouldn't. But that's what happened at the beginning. They were taking it lightly, thinking everyone would just do it. When people didn't do it, I think something like
70% of customers refused to do it.
Yeah,
which obviously, what are they going to do if every company asks them to provide these details and they won't provide them? well, they're going to end up with the black market, or they're going to quit gambling altogether. Now, I think it's naive to assume that 100% of people will just quit gambling altogether.
Well, that's one of the. And we talk about parlays and stuff like that, and I'm in a position with you. I've had so many people offer me asking me for affordability checks. I've refused to do them, which means I'm limited to every single sports book. I have a monthly limitation. Why on earth am I going to have a future bet? No, whatever I've got to play with, I might as well use it on the US Open. I might as well use it on Wimbledon.
Yeah, you don't want to tie up the money.
And also, I am one person who I do use some black market sports books.
Mm-hmm.
But would I trust them to play 6 anti-post bets that are going to go on for 9 months and hope that in the end of the day they go, oh, well done, Nigel. Yeah, you got your money. 9 months of these kind of people, I've got absolutely no idea. You need to pay on. So I'm never going to place. I'm never going to place an anti-post bet again. I'm never going to place an anti-post bet again. So that's another problem you've got. But I mean, we are saying that there is problem gambling in this country. We all know people have been affected by it. But what would you do, Neil? What would you do? How if you were now pitched in front of the government and you were there, and what would be the way that you would take it? How would you change this all?
Well, I wouldn't do affordability checks because I think they're just such a broad brush. I mean, I've said already that what one person can afford is different to another. Also, the whole basis of the problem gambling thing is it's pseudo scientific nonsense. I mean, I don't know whether you've ever filled in one of these surveys to find out if you're a problem gambler. I tried one.
You're always going to say the wrong answers anyway.
I tried one yesterday morning, and one of the questions was, has anyone in your family ever judged you over your gambling? Well, I would say pretty much every single gambler, that must have happened to them. I mean, I met my cousin's, I can't remember what relation it was, I think my cousin's brother recently. And he knew that I was a gambler. He doesn't really approve of gambling. So he started asking me some questions, and I felt like I was being a bit judged here. And he was asking me about, quite personal questions about how much money I make and, have I ever lost more than this and that. And I answered all of his questions because I thought he seemed genuinely interested. But he 100% was judging me. And he feels that, he said to me, it's a mugs game, nobody wins. And I said to him, well, I'm 57, and apart from 9 years, this is all I've ever done. I did have a job for about 9 years, but the rest of the time I haven't had a job. And, obviously you can have your beliefs, but I'm standing here telling you it's possible to win. But irrespective of all of that, he definitely judged me. And when I filled in the survey, it asked me, have any of your family, I can't remember the exact wording, but I failed on that one question. There was only a 10-question thing. And when I completed the questionnaire, it said I was a problem gambler. It recommended that I should think about the Samaritans, suicide prevention, and that I should consider contacting Gamblers Anonymous. Now, I can't remember what the other questions that I had answered to make them come to that conclusion, but I feel like if the questions are as woolly as that and as easy to kind of fail on as that, well, then any numbers that we create about what percentage of people are problem gamblers are just nonsense. And this was a sort of national campaign, widely respected within the industry as being, in favour of gambling reform. Yet their questions were just ludicrous. It was very easy to answer yes to many of the questions without being a problem gambler. Have you ever tried to win? Have you ever gambled to try and win back money that you lost the previous time that you gambled? Well, surely everybody that gambles is trying to win. I mean, that's not a bad thing, is it? I don't know. But if you answer yes to that question, it means, according to them, that you're a problem. That is another black mark against you being a problem gambler. Have you found yourself thinking about gambling a lot of the time in the last fortnight? Well, yeah, I'm a professional gambler. Of course I have. I mean, it's my job. I think about it all the time. But even if it wasn't my job, like, if it's your keen hobby that you enjoy, well, yeah, of course you're going to think about it. Like, it's not inherently a good thing to spend no time thinking about it. The guy that I was debating yesterday, he seemed to think that there was no benefit to society from people gambling, and there was no benefit to you personally. So I see gambling as akin to going to the cinema. You don't buy a physical product. You pay money for something that gives you pleasure, that enhances your life. It can be frustrating. It can be annoying. I've been to the cinema and thought, this is a load of rubbish. I haven't enjoyed this, and I've spent money on it. I've walked out of the cinema before. But they're very similar things. You don't get a product. But there are times where I look back and think, God, that movie was fabulous. I'll always remember that, and it had a striking effect on me. And it's the same with, I can remember bets that I've had on golf tournaments and NFL and, whatever, that have made me, when I look back on them, I have warm feelings about that 20 years later. I think they're very similar things. We don't say that people shouldn't go to the cinema because it doesn't buy anything in the economy. It doesn't create more rubbish for me to pile up in my house.
My £150 bet of the weekend on under 2.5 goals in the Sunderland v Brentford match, which was a loser, gave me much more pleasure than going to see the new Naked Gun on Friday with Paula.
Well, I don't want to hear about the Naked Gun until you've seen The Sting. I don't want to hear anything more about it.
I mean, we can talk about this for.
Let's leave it there, Nigel, because we've probably made this the longest ever dojo, I think.
Well, we have, because it is an important subject. It's something that you feel really passionately about, and obviously, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. It's a real divisive thing. I mean, one thing, just quickly before we go, I mean, the one thing that stuck to my mind the other day, a friend of mine, obviously I was buying a lot of friends of mine Oasis tickets. I've got my own seats at Wembley, which is I'm very lucky to have, which makes me allow to buy. So a couple of friends of mine bought some Oasis tickets. So one of the guys wanted a couple of hospitality tickets. I think he paid me, I don't know, £800 or £850. He got a meal, he got food and drinks, stuff like that. Anyway, he's a gambler, he wanted to part of it, and then they said they wanted to see my bank statements, because he sent me £850 for buying a ticket, nothing to do with Oasis, and they won't open an account because he's a friend of mine. Now, where is the logic of that? That someone is a friend of mine, that I'm buying a ticket to go to a football match, they've got to pay it, and then he's not allowed to open a betting account because Nigel Seeley has had interaction with him.
Well, even more than that,
nothing to do with betting. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Even more than that, I've heard of bookmaking companies seeing that you did a transfer with Joe Bloggs, £50, and then saying, "Oh, we need to see 12 months of his bank statements." That's
what they're asking for. They're asking for me, and that's why his account is
ridiculous,
because he bought 2 tickets to see Oasis for.
And nobody's passed any laws about any of this.
No, and
the Gambling Commission claim that this is not something that they've mandated. It's utterly ridiculous.
It's going to run and run and run. Hopefully, British horse racing can get through these cloudy storms that are gathering over the sport. It's a big week of sport next week, and for the British horse racing with York, obviously a big week of sport here on the dojo. We have the start of the US Open over in New York, and obviously the Premier League continues as well. Lots of content here on the Benny Weekly Studios. Make sure you ring that bell and be notified of anything that drops. Obviously, it's a bit of a long show today, but it's a big talking point in the country today, and obviously Neil was on that show yesterday, and I felt that people are going to be asking questions about it. We had the perfect opportunity to have Neil on. He's spoken about it in great passion and detail. If you've got loads of you can have some thoughts on that. If you've got any thoughts, please put any experiences you've had. If you're an American bettor and you can't understand what's happening here, and if things are changing in this landscape over in America, please put your thoughts in here as well. But it's been a very interesting Betting Weekly Dojo today. Be careful you put the each way double on, I suppose, for the next season. Be very, very careful. That's it for the Dojo. We'll be back again on Monday when myself and Neil do have more conversations about the world of sports betting, but please hit that subscribe button. Neil, thanks for your time. Have a good week. Take care.